So let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence. It's this incredible technology that, on one hand, promises to solve humanity's biggest problems, and on the other, it's the one some people fear could be our last invention, ever. That tension, right? The world-changing promise versus the existential peril, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. All right, let's get into it. But before we dive deep into AI, we gotta take a step back and ask a really fundamental question, one that people have been asking for, well, forever. Is new technology always progress? Every big invention seems to bring this wave of anxiety with it, this fear that maybe we're losing something vital in our rush to innovate.
And you know what? This feeling, this anxiety, it is definitely not new. These tech panics, as they're called, have a long, long history. I mean, go all the way back to ancient Greece, and you had Socrates literally worrying that the written word would make us all forgetful. Jump ahead to the 1970s, and teachers were absolutely convinced that calculators would mean students couldn't do basic math anymore. And more recently, we've got the Google effect, which shows we don't remember facts, we just remember where to find them. So all these concerns we have about AI today, they're really just the latest chapter in this super old story. Okay, so to really get a handle on the unique challenges AI throws at us, we have to start with one of its most immediate dangers, bias. We're going to look at how our own human prejudices can sneak their way into the code, into the algorithms that are making more and more important decisions about our lives. So what are we even talking about when we say algorithmic bias? Basically, it's when a computer program produces results that are systematically prejudiced against certain groups of people. And look, it's not because the AI is sitting there thinking evil thoughts. It's because it learned from data that was already full of our human biases. And that leads to real, actual harm in the real world. And believe me, this is not just some theoretical academic problem. Take a look at financial services. AI is being used right now to decide who gets a loan. But think about it. If the historical data you feed that AI comes from a world where women had a harder time getting credit, what do you think the algorithm is going to learn? It learns that same unfairness, and then it just keeps perpetuating it, locking women out of huge economic opportunities. So how does this bias actually sneak into the system? Well, it happens in a few key ways. First up, you've got sampling bias. This is when the data you use to train the AI just doesn't reflect the real world. Like, imagine an app that was trained mostly on data from male smartphone users in a certain market. It's going to be skewed, right? Then you have labeling bias. This is where our own assumptions get baked into the labels themselves. Think about labels like doctor versus nurse. They can accidentally become stand-ins or proxies for gender. And finally, you've got proxy discrimination, and this one is super subtle. The algorithm might use something that seems totally neutral, like how much time you spend at a specific place. But what if that location is highly correlated with a protected group? Boom, you've got discrimination, just through a back door. And the consequences of this stuff, they can be absolutely devastating. There was a huge investigation by ProPublica into the system called Compass. It's an AI tool used in the US court system to predict if a defendant might reoffend. And what they found was just staggering. The algorithm was twice as likely to falsely label Black defendants as high risk, while at the same time it was more likely to wrongly label white defendants as low risk. I mean, we're talking about bias that literally changes people's lives. Okay, so where does all this bias even come from? What's the raw material? Well, take a look at this. This chart shows what kind of data digital loan apps ask for permission to access on your phone, and it is a lot. A whopping 88% want to see your contacts, 75% want access to your photos and your text messages. All this deeply personal data becomes the fuel for these algorithms, creating this massive data set where all these hidden biases can just fester and grow. All right, so we've talked about bias, but the impact of AI goes way beyond that. So now, let's zoom out and look at how it's not just reshaping our jobs and the economy, but maybe even the very way our brains are wired. You know, for years, the prediction about AI and the economy was pretty straightforward. The story went like this. Robots are going to take our jobs, but don't worry, because we'll get this massive explosion in productivity in return. But the reality? Well, the reality so far has been a lot weirder. We're actually seeing pretty sluggish productivity, wages that are kind of stuck in place, and this growing gap between the rich and everybody else. So AI is definitely having an effect. It's just not the one we all thought it would be. And its impact isn't just about money and jobs out there in the world. The more we weave AI into our daily lives, the more it starts to change our internal world too. You know, how we think, what we remember, the skills we value. Yeah, researchers have a name for this. They call it the cognitive cost.
We already talked a little about how we outsource our memory to Google, but what about something like navigation? Think about it. Our constant reliance on GPS apps might actually be physically changing our brains, specifically a part called the hippocampus, which is absolutely crucial for memory and for knowing where you are in space. There was this incredible study back in 2000 of London taxi drivers. To get their license, they have to pass this insanely hard test called the knowledge, where they memorize 25,000 streets. And when researchers scanned their brains, they found that the taxi drivers' hippocampi were significantly larger than the average person's. They literally grew their brains to do the job. So it really makes you wonder, right? What happens to our brains when we just offload that entire mental muscle to a machine?
Okay, so we're facing all these massive challenges, from deep-seated bias to literally rewiring our brains. The next logical question has to be, how do we get a handle on this? How do we control it? And that brings us to the global search for rules, for regulations, for some kind of framework to make AI accountable to us.
And when you look around the world right now, you see two very different approaches starting to take shape. On one side, you've got the European Union. They've taken this very proactive, unified approach that's really centered on privacy as a fundamental right. Then, on the other side, you have the United States, which is, well, it's more of a fragmented patchwork of laws. It changes from state to state, from industry to industry, and it tends to rely more on people suing after the damage has been done. The EU demands things like impact assessments to force transparency, while in the US, you sometimes have government agencies admitting they don't even fully understand the AI systems they're using. And really, the heart of the European approach comes down to this one powerful idea: privacy by design. It's actually a pretty simple concept, but it's profound. Instead of building some new technology and then trying to bolt on privacy features at the end, you make privacy a non-negotiable, foundational part of the design from the very first step. It's not an afterthought, it's baked into the blueprint. And this isn't just some abstract legal idea. There are real, concrete, technical tools that make this happen. Things like data minimization. That just means companies are only allowed to collect the absolute minimum data they need from you and nothing extra. Or something called edge processing, which is pretty cool. It means sensitive analysis can happen right there on your own device, on your phone, without your personal info ever getting sent up to a company's cloud server. These kinds of safeguards prove that we can build powerful AI that also respects our privacy. It's not an either-or.
So here's what this all boils down to. The future of AI isn't some runaway train that we can only stand back and watch. No way. It is being built brick by brick, decision by decision, right now. And those decisions are about our values, about who's in charge, and about who has control. You know, this quote from Women's World Banking, it just hits the nail on the head. Like all technologies, algorithms are not good or bad. They merely amplify the intent of their user. The technology itself is just a tool. It's a magnifying glass. And what it amplifies, whether that's fairness or bias, whether it's empowerment or control, that depends entirely on the people who are building it and using it. The good news is there is a path forward. There are clear, actionable steps that any organization can take to build more responsible AI. It starts with getting the right people in the room. You need a team with legal experts, business folks, and the machine learning gurus all talking to each other. Then, leadership has to step up and make those tough strategic calls about the trade-offs between, say, fairness and pure efficiency. From there, the data scientists have to actively use their tools to hunt down and fix bias. And finally, and this is so important, it all has to be institutionalized. It has to become a core, non-negotiable part of how things are done, with written policies and regular audits. And all of this brings us to our final question. And honestly, it might be the most important one of all. Who should control this stuff? Who gets to make the final call on the development, the purchase, and the testing of these incredibly powerful systems? Is it just the coders? Is it the companies who buy them? Or do we as a society have a fundamental role to play in setting the rules of the game? The answer to that question, well, it's going to define not just the future of technology, but the future of our society itself.